Welcome back, Fan-Fueled family. Today we're going to look at the most basic category of materia in Final Fantasy VII, magic materia. Before we start though, I'd greatly appreciate your support, so bolt that subscribe button and let's get into it. Magic materia is the first kind of materia the player has access to in Final Fantasy VII. Cloud starts with two equipped, lightning and ice. Magic materia is very straightforward. Each materia orb contains one or more magic spells that the character wielding it can then cast. Magic materia is split into three categories: attack, restore, and indirect. As you'd expect from the name, attack magic deals direct damage to a target, restorative magic heals HP or removes negative status conditions, and indirect magic is magic that has non-direct effects, such as enhancing the party's abilities or weakening the enemy. These are commonly referred to in gaming as buffs and debuffs, respectively. I'm going to cover them in that order: attack, restore, and then indirect. There are also a few extremely powerful spells that, while technically belonging to those three categories, are always at the bottom of the magic list, perhaps due to their sheer power. I'll cover those last. Players newer to the franchise may be more familiar with a slightly different naming scheme for spell levels. For example, the first materia we're going to talk about is the Fire materia, which has three spells: Fire, Fire 2, and Fire 3. In more recent games, these are written as Fire, Fira, and Firaga. I'll be using the original format used in Final Fantasy VII to discuss this. First up, Fire. As just mentioned, the Fire materia contains the Fire, Fire 2, and Fire 3 spells, each inflicting fire element damage. Fire is one of the materia that the player has access to very early in the game. It can be bought at the very first materia vendor the player encounters, and is reliably purchasable throughout the rest of the game. Next, Ice. Ice has three spells: Ice, Ice 2, and Ice 3, and each spell inflicts ice element damage. In addition to being part of Cloud's starting equipment at the very beginning of the game, it's very readily available at most materia vendors throughout the game. Lightning materia has three spells as well: Bolt, Bolt 2, and Bolt 3, each inflicting lightning element damage. This is the other of the two starting materia equipped to Cloud at the very beginning of the game. Lightning is very useful in the early game, as many of the enemies in the opening few hours of the game are robots, which almost always have a weakness to lightning. It's also purchasable from almost all materia sellers. Earth has three spells: Quake, Quake 2, and Quake 3, each dealing earth element damage. Earth is the first materia that cannot be acquired in the first segment of the game, the Midgar section. This can first be purchased at Calm. Due to its earth element, most flying enemies are immune to it, but it balances that by having notably higher damage than the previously discussed spells. Poison's three spells are Bio, Bio 2, and Bio 3, all of which deal poison element damage. The poison materia, fittingly, can also inflict the poison status on enemies. While a single poison materia can be found late in the Midgar section, it cannot be bought until the party leaves Midgar and is first purchasable at Calm. Gravity has three spells as well: Demi, Demi 2, and Demi 3. As a gravity element spell, the Demi spells deal fractional or percentage damage, taking the target's current HP and calculating the damage from that. Demi inflicts 25% of the target's current HP as damage, Demi 2 inflicts 50%, and Demi 3 inflicts 75%. Due to this ability to potentially deal massive amounts of damage per hit, many bigger monsters and bosses are immune to the gravity element, but there is one notable exception that we'll discuss in a later video. Gravity can first be acquired in Cosmo Canyon at the end of Red 13's quest there, and can be purchased in a few locations afterwards. Now let's look at restorative magic. The first restorative materia that the player has access to is, fittingly, Restore. Restore has 4 spells: Cure, Cure 2, Regen, and Cure 3. The Cure spells simply heal the target's HP, while Regen applies the Regen status, making the subject recover HP over time, sort of like a reverse poison status. Restore can be found fairly early in the Midgar section, shortly after Tifa joins the party, and is purchasable at almost every materia vendor in the game so that the player always has a way to acquire healing effects. Due to Final Fantasy VII's strange coding, Restore does not actually heal in the traditional sense. Instead, it inflicts damage on the target and flags that damage as healing damage, so the value is added to the target's HP rather than subtracted. Interestingly, healing effects will have the opposite effect on undead monsters. For a simple example, a spell that would heal a party member for 200 HP would, if cast on undead monsters, instead inflict 200 HP in damage. There aren't that many undead in Final Fantasy VII, but this is most apparent in the fight against the boss Gina Tak, who is an undead spirit residing in the back of Cosmo Canyon. By simply casting a high-level healing spell on Gina Tak, the player can inflict incredible amounts of damage, and using an X potion, one of which can actually be found in the caves where Gina Tak is fought, as though the developers intended the player to use it that way, will instantly defeat the boss. The heal materia has 3 spells: Poisona, Esna, and Resist. Poisona cures the poison status, Esna cures most negative status conditions, and Resist grants the resist status, which protects from most status effects. Heal can be purchased at Calm, Junon, and Costa del Sol in the early game, and Gungaga at any time. Poisona and Esna get their names as compounds of Japanese prefixes and suffixes. The na suffix comes from the Japanese word for cure, and the s prefix comes from the Japanese words for eternal and status. Poisona literally means to cure of poison, while Esna literally means to cure of statuses. The revive materia has 2 spells, Life and Life 2. Life revives a fallen character and brings them up to 25% of their maximum HP, while Life 2 revives a fallen character and returns them to full health. The revive materia can only be purchased at Junon or Costa del Sol during the early parts of the game. As mentioned above, using restorative spells on undead enemies will have the opposite effect. Casting life on an undead enemy will kill them outright. One fan favorite tactic to use with the revive materia is to pair it with the final attack materia, which we'll discuss in the support materia video. Final attack casts the attached materia when the party member with it equipped is down, so they'll immediately cast life or life 2, bringing themselves back from death automatically. Indirect materia, as mentioned earlier, is designed to provide benefits to allies or detrimental effects to enemies. Mystify only has 2 spells, Confuse and Berserk. Confuse, as you'd expect, applies the confusion status, making enemies target their allies. Berserk applies the Berserk status, increasing the subject's physical attack, but they'll only use physical attacks to strike at random enemies. Seal has 2 spells as well, Sleepel and Silence. Sleepel applies the sleep status, making the subject unable to attack, while Silence inflicts the silenced status, preventing the target from using magic. Barrier has 4 spells: Barrier, M-Barrier, Reflect, and Wall. Barrier grants the barrier status, which halves all incoming physical damage. M-Barrier does the other half of the equation, granting the M-Barrier status, which halves incoming magical damage. Reflect sets up the Reflect status, which makes spells bounce off the subject and hit the caster instead. Wall sets up both Barrier and M-Barrier simultaneously. The time materia has 3 spells: Haste, Slow, and Stop. Haste grants the haste status, which speeds up the subject's ATB gauge so they can act sooner each turn. Slow does the opposite, cutting the rate of which the subject's ATB gauge fills in half, and Stop prevents the target from acting at all until the effect ends. Exit has 2 spells, Escape and Remove. Escape simply exits the battle, which is useful for situations where the party can't escape, such as an attack from both sides. Remove takes enemies out of the battle, though if the party wins the fight, the removed enemy does not contribute to money, EXP, AP, or items earned. Transform has 2 spells, Mini and Toad. Mini inflicts the small status, reducing the target in size and dropping their attack power to 1, so they can only inflict 1 point of damage with physical attacks. Toad inflicts the frog status, which turns the target into a toad, preventing them from any action other than standard physical attacks, casting the spell Toad if they have it equipped, and item use, as well as significantly reducing attack power. The final materia classified as indirect is Destruct, which has 3 spells, D-Barrier, D-Spell, and Death. D-Barrier eliminates a target's Barrier, M-Barrier, Reflect, and Shield statuses, while D-Spell removes all status effects that are not covered by Esna: Haste, Slow, Stop, Regen, the various barriers, Death, Force, and Resist. Most notable, however, is the Death spell, the final spell unlocked on the Destruct materia. Death has a 44% chance to instantly kill the target, though, of course, bosses and many enemies are completely immune to death effects. If they're targeted by the death spell, the spell will simply fail. Now, let's get into the power materia. Each of these super powerful magic materia can only be acquired once, and any further copies must be trained up out of the original. Further, none of these spells will have any changes when paired with the all materia. First is Comet, which has 2 spells, Comet and Comet 2. Comet deals massive non-elemental damage to a single target, while Comet 2 inflicts 4 hits on random enemies for massive non-elemental damage on each. Neither spell can be reflected. Comet can be found at the ancient capital, above the entryway to the altar. Contain is a little unique in its execution. Unlike most other magic materia, Contain is not a single element, but has 4 spells, each with their own element. These spells are the pinnacle of their respective element, even including some summons. Freeze is the first of these 4.
Alright everyone, chill.
And does massive ice element damage to a single target and grants a 68% chance of inflicting Stop. Break deals massive earth element damage to a single target and has a 32% chance of inflicting the Petrify status. Tornado does massive wind element damage to a single target and has a 32% chance of inflicting Confusion. Finally, Flare deals massive fire damage to a single target. Unlike the other 3, it has no additional effect. The Contain materia can be acquired in the town of Mideel. Speak to the small white chocobo, feed it Mehmet grains, then scratch it behind the ear and it will give you Contain. Full Cure has only 1 spell, and the materia must be leveled up to use that spell. When you first get it, the materia does nothing. The Full Cure spell fully heals a character's HP and cannot be reflected. Full Cure can be found in the endgame in Cosmo Canyon. Shield has only one spell, Shield, and like Full Cure, must be leveled up to use the spell. Shield grants the target complete immunity to physical and elemental damage, though they can still be harmed by items which have no element and non-elemental attacks like Comet. The spell cannot be reflected. The shield status can be removed by D-barrier and D-spell effects. The shield materia can be found in the Northern Cave, the game's final dungeon. The last of these incredibly powerful materia is Ultima. Like Full Cure and Shield, Ultima does nothing when it's first equipped and must be leveled up to be of any use. When cast, however, Ultima is arguably the most powerful non-summon spell in the game, as it inflicts massive non-elemental damage to all enemies and cannot be reflected. Ultima is a recurring spell in the Final Fantasy franchise, first appearing in Final Fantasy II and recurring as recently as Final Fantasy XVI. Lulu in Final Fantasy X explained Ultima's effect rather succinctly when she casts it.
No pain, but not for long.
Her words imply that Ultima is extremely painful for the few seconds that the target has left when the spell is cast. Ultima can be acquired at the end of the North Corel segment of the huge Materia section of the story. If the party stops the train before it reaches Corel, the party will receive Ultima for free. If they catch the train but fail to stop it, Ultima may be purchased for 50,000 gil. If you fail to even catch up to the train, reload a save and try again, because Ultima is not obtainable. Lastly, I'd like to discuss something that many players don't ever see: Master Magic. The Master Magic Materia is a single magic materia that contains every single magic materia spell. Master Magic is, naturally, very hard to obtain, and there are only two ways to acquire it. Master Magic is great. It really simplifies things. You don't need to have 6 different magic materia equipped, just one Master Magic, and it can be paired with almost any support materia. All, MP Turbo, even Quadra Magic, which really frees up the rest of your materia slots for other purposes. And that's all the magic materia. Thanks for watching. I put a lot of work into this video, so I really hope you all enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite magic materia is and why. Mine is probably Contain because of the sheer versatility. You get 4 elements for a single slot of your equipment. If you enjoyed this, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. It takes 2 seconds for you and really helps me out. Share the channel with your friends, with your family, show your dog, tell your cat. Every view, every like, every comment, every subscription is another step towards more and better content. Take care, my fan-fueled family, and I'll see you in the next one.